some notes. So now, where are we at? Actually, I'm going to move here. We're at the final stage. We made it. We have the job. We passed the job advertisement. We passed the resume screener. We even got through the interview process with video interviews. Now we are part of the company. So in this final case study session, I thought it might be interesting to kind of look a bit more holistically at companies, how they employ basically people analytics technology, which it does recruiting, but also like affects people who just work at the company. So this is kind of moving a bit beyond the recruiting phase and moving more towards onboarding and then seeing like what happens now. So your new employer already knows a lot about you, your age, your address, your education, everything they maybe found out through the social media analysis they did. But now they may be able to find out a lot more about you using people analytics technology. For example, they could analyze your data, they could track your work processes, oops, I'm sorry, and kind of find out more about like everything that's going to be happening. So that's kind of what we're looking at today. And later on, I'm going to go to this. So we're going to start with like a very broad overview of what is people analytics. And again, if there are people who actually work in people analytics here, I would be very happy if you can kind of just jump in and add to this, because again, I'm coming here from like a very theoretic standpoint. I'm going to present mainly the work of my colleague on this. So I've read the stuff, but I've not lived it. So please comment. And we're kind of going to check maybe like, because many times employees are not even aware that this technology is being used. So what could be some signs that my company maybe is using people analytics? Then we're going to move to a bit of a different term, which is connected algorithmic management, which is also a term that's like around a lot at the moment. And in our case study, we're going to look a bit more at call centers and how they employ it, and also why I think that kind of the extensive work that's been done on call centers is becoming more relevant for many workplaces beyond. And in the end, we'll have a group discussion in breakout groups. Okay, so let's get started. Just again, as I'm presenting, I may miss things in the chat. So if you have something, please just raise your hand. Moving on. So people analytics, I'm sorry, my graphic is in German because I usually speak more in German. But basically, like, what is it? What is the kind of the applications of people analytics? Starts with recruiting. Their kind of data is collected. Then performance assessment. It can be used for compliance management to see if like employees are being compliant. This is especially wonderful kind of in finance and insurance sectors and so on. Then we have the kind of organization of work processes, and we have like employee retention or termination. There's a lot of predictions that can be made. And so what we are interested in especially is kind of the ways that employees' personal data can be used to make predictions or to make automated decisions where humans are not necessarily in the loop. Like, they have to be in many cases, but we know that this is always kind of difficult because even if they are in the loop on paper, there is kind of this algorithmic bias that people kind of just tend to believe the prediction that the computer makes and think, ah, yeah, okay, like this is a neutral program, it's telling me to do this, I'm just going to do this. So this is kind of what we're interested in here. And I would say like this kind of technology is very widespread. And I'm not saying that it's bad in itself. On the contrary, I think like many especially large companies could not operate without having some kind of a like people analytics system in place probably. But again, we need to talk about like how it's employed and with which kind of ethical considerations are going into place. So first of all, kind of we're going to start again. Oh, sorry. With a short poll, just to kind of get the thinking hat on, just a quick poll to see, does your employer use people analytics? Yes, no, I don't know. Once again, please go to whoclap.com and use the code that you can see there. So we still have some responses coming in. I'm going to wait a couple of seconds. Looks like about half of you have entered. But we already see a trend emerging, I think, that many people don't know. Okay, thank you very much. So 15% say yes, 35% say no, and 13% say I don't, I'm sorry, 50% say I don't know, which is 30 people in this poll. So yeah, this makes a lot of sense to me because like we usually don't know if our company is using people analytics, and if it is, kind of what it's using it for, and what is being tracked, which kind of decisions the program may be making about employees. So just wanted to share with you a very, this is a very quick, superficial checklist. It is not in any way kind of comprehensive, but these could be some signs that it's more likely that your company is using people analytics. Size, so if you work in a large company, it's more likely that it's worthwhile for them to invest in this kind of technology. For smaller companies, they probably don't need it because they can just use their own proprietary programs, or they have a good overview over their employees anyway. Then the sector. So this is kind of based on work that, so Algorithm Watch is a German and Swiss organization, and this is kind of mainly based on work that a colleague of mine did for Switzerland. And there we found that in logistics, insurance, finance, tech, and pharma, the companies tend to use people analytics more, which if you think about it, makes a lot of sense because they're kind of used to a lot of computing anyway, and kind of they deal with data a lot, these kind of sectors. And they have complex processes with a lot of compliance structures, with a lot of kind of data points and oversight needed. So these are kind of the sectors where you could expect to see people analytics more. Do you have an HR department? This may seem like a weird question, but I think in Germany, many of the smaller companies don't necessarily have their own HR department. They have maybe a department that does all sorts of internal operations things. And if you don't have an HR department, it's very unlikely that they have a comprehensive strategy that includes looking at employees' data. That's what you would definitely need as a first point to have that. And then does your company use Microsoft 365, Workday, SAP, Salesforce, IBM Watson, I could add as well. So these are all kind of technologies that, of course, have a lot of different functions, but which have capabilities for like analyzing the personal data of employees as well. They at least offer these capabilities, even if maybe not all companies use all of these things. Yeah, that's okay. That's what I just said. Then we're going to continue kind of to think about this. So again, to kind of get into the headspace, we're going to start with this poll, like what do you think are the benefits of using this technology? Just again, Google clap, use the code, you know the drill. Okay. As people are still adding, I'm going to take up a question that popped up in the chat. Does legislation allow use of people analytics software in Germany? That's a very interesting question. So a couple of years ago, Algorithm Watch did kind of a, I'm missing the English word now. They looked at ein Rechtsguthaben, like a law, they analyzed the law situation around this and found that, I mean, many companies are using people analytics software without even realizing that it may actually be in a legal gray area, or it may actually even be illegal, especially if you're kind of making decisions about people. So I think the GDPR, which is already mentioned here, can come into play there. And the thing is just that, many people are, like many companies are simply not aware that the technology they are using may actually infringe upon rights, and like the people that work there are not aware that this kind of technology is being used. So even though it may actually be in a legal gray area, like nothing is really happening about that. Like a short response. If anybody else has any additional insight there, happy to add. Okay, I'll now look at the benefits of people analytics. Thank you all for adding. So the big one is efficiency. I think that's clear. Then we have decision making is data driven. A couple of people added something like that. Insight into trends, efficient allocation of tasks, reducing workload, reduce ad hocness, so again planning, KPI driven operations, track productivity, performance management, process improvement, diversity tracking, real data analysis, alleged objectivity. I think that's something we can discuss. Improve accuracy, and kind of try to be quantitative and objective. Yes, I think that is definitely the case. And then we'll just continue with the next slide, which is some risks associated with people analytics. The same drill, please add your thoughts. Okay. Thank you again for adding. So here, the main one that seems to be emerging is privacy. So I'm guessing privacy violations. Then bias. There could be a chilling effect, power inequality, reductionism, KPI blindness, transparency and fairness, decision-making on stereotypes, once again, bias in decision-making, so all the things we've already been talking about. If you're going for a quantitative approach, of course, it's going to be less qualitative. Yeah, I think this covers a lot of the risks associated with this. Okay, thank you very much. So yeah, just to kind of reiterate, you've already said of all of this, the benefits are obviously efficiency, better functioning systems and processes, support with repetitive tasks, more time for creativity is a big promise. Oops, I'm sorry. And then kind of the risks is, well, yeah, if depending on how it's implemented, this can lead to surveillance or monitoring. This constant monitoring through productivity can lead to kind of an overload, which can have effects on health and cause stress. If you kind of optimize everything to only have the tasks that to have if you have no breathers in between, this leads to a very high labor intensity. So everybody only has their stressful tasks that remain. I don't know if you've experienced this, but when I started working, you still had the situation sometimes that you had to go to the printer to print something out, and then you would just stand by the printer, wait until it printed, and you had a little break. And now we kind of these kinds of things happen less and less. So your day is more full, basically. And this can lead to a higher stress. And of course, it also leads to more efficiency. But the question is kind of if the workers also benefit from actually the increased output that they generate. And again, we have the issue of implementation. So even if it's a good software that kind of has ethics considerations, managers may overestimate its capabilities, the automation bias that I already mentioned, and kind of follow decisions. I think somebody has their microphone on. Maybe you could turn it off.
I did it.
Thank
Can
you.
happen. Yeah, don't worry.
Thank you very much. And yeah, if the employee data is used, of course, there's always the risk of data protection violation. And if you're kind of implementing a broad tracking, does this mean that they're also tracking maybe data outside of work? More and more people have kind of phones that they use that they may kind of have a dual use, so at home and at work. Is this taken into account as well, or is there a strong barrier? The difference kind of between a simple algorithm that just does a if-then calculation would be that some of these software could link different data points, and you have a very holistic picture of the employee, and can, for example, make predictions about if somebody is going to leave the company soon, or who should be kind of terminated. So these kinds of decisions are also being made with this software. And one additional point that is very important to me is kind of personal data versus aggregated data. So there is a lot of data protection agreements like the GDPR and so on that protect individuals' personal data. But for kind of the aggregated data, So looking at all employee data, even if it's kind of anonymized, there is less protections in place. But like there's different problems around this because on the one hand, like the aggregated data can kind of be used to exert additional control over individual employees. And it can also kind of be used to control the workforce as a whole. So we kind of at Algorithm Watch have like been arguing for a long time that we kind of need collective bargaining agreements there, because you again have this power imbalance situation where on the one hand you have like an individual employee who kind of checks the box on the data protection thing, doesn't really understand what's going on, and on the other side you have a company who may be analyzing this data and may be making decisions about individuals based on the aggregated data. And this is not covered by data protection agreements. Oops, it's not moving on. What is happening? Okay, I see one question before we move on. Yep.
Yeah, sorry, Clara. So I do have a question on what you've just mentioned, please. Right, with regard to personal data versus aggregated data, because of course the impact of personal data or the misuse of personal data is the impact is clear, I think, relatively clear. Whereas if you're talking about aggregated data, I think it's a bit more complex. You know, how would you almost quantify or qualify the impact on an individual employee because of the use of aggregated data? So I'm interested to understand your kind of reasoning behind that.
Yeah, sure. So maybe it's easier to, like, if I give an example. So one functionality of that people analytics software can have is to make a prediction about who should get a promotion or not. So this is something that would directly affect an individual, but the system looks not only at like how is the performance of this one person. It kind of looks at all the data, compares all the different data points, and then with like machine learning algorithms comes up with kind of metrics to show like who is the best there, or like not only promotions but also like who should be terminated. So these are kind of decisions that directly affect an individual, but the computers or the technology arrives at the decision to make this recommendation based not only on data around the individual, but around kind of all of like analyzing all of the data together. That makes sense. That would be one example.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Does that make it more clear?
Yeah. I mean, I don't necessarily see how that is different from, you know, how you might discriminate currently. Like, you know, you might not want women of a certain age because you think they may have babies, you know, and therefore leave employment. You know, so I don't really see how that's different from maybe current profiling that an employer might use. Even though it might be broader because you're looking at factors that might be considered objective.
So I think the difference or the point that I'm trying to get to is there's a difference in legal repercussions that I have as an individual. So for example, with GDPR, you are protected against automatic decision making. Like you cannot, for example, be like your contract cannot be terminated, or you cannot be like kicked out of somewhere based only on the decision of a like machine. But it's unclear like if this is covered here, because it's not only looking at kind of my personal data and so on, it's kind of looking at all of the aggregated data together. And it's not like substantially different. I think that like you're right, it is about profiling. That's what we're kind of talking about here. So it is kind of about like profiling, which is not covered like with the same very strong protections that my individual data is covered with.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so then kind of broadening it a little bit, I think people analytics is a quite clearly defined field where people work in. Algorithmic management is a bit more broad. It's a term that kind of originated by academics who were analyzing platform work, gig economy, sorry. But it's kind of expanding. So it's like, I think we all know about the Uber drivers and food delivery people and cleaners that work on platforms and are algorithmically managed. So it's kind of this big slogan that I heard a lot in different kind of news reporting. Before the AI replaces you, it's going to become your boss. So that's kind of what algorithmic management means. And it's kind of been spreading from gig economy and platform work to other sectors. For example, logistics. I think many of you have probably heard kind of the Amazon examples where people are kind of like tasks are very like automated so much that people don't have time to go to the bathroom, and then they're just running around all the time to get the packages in the right place and so on, and there's no time left to do anything in between. But it's also spreading to restaurants and restaurant sector. In call centers, it's been present for, I would say, a very long time, and like regular office work as well. And just so the reason why like we think this is important is that kind of the platform economy and the disruptive tech companies behind there are kind of introducing a new way of working. And what we worry about is that they're setting a precedent that will kind of spread to other workplaces, to more traditional work, and we'll have kind of a new standard, and this could kind of undermine existing labor law, which, like, as many of you know, didn't like just appear out of nowhere. It was very hard fought for, and so I think what we have to watch for, like in this particular moment, is that yeah, the spread of algorithmic management doesn't kind of infringe on these labor rights. And here's a definition from the European Trade Union Institute, actually in commenting the Platform Work Directive, which has already been mentioned, which is a new law that's been decided on to regulate the platform work industry. And I mean, obviously, this is very much from the union perspective, so please keep this in mind. But they define algorithmic management as workforce planning and work task allocation, dynamic piece rate setting per task, controlling workers by monitoring, steering, surveilling, or rating their work, and the time they need to perform specific tasks, nudging their behavior, measuring actual worker performance against predicted time and or effort required to complete tasks and providing recommendations, penalizing workers, for example, through termination or suspension of their accounts. Metrics might include estimated time, customer rating, or workers' rating of customers. Yeah, so this is a central feature of the platform economy, and as I said, maybe gradually spreading to other areas. Yes, there is a question. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Clara. So I just have one more question on this very specific topic, really, which is, you know, when you're looking at this, are you looking at the broader issue around how the organization of work is changing because of platform work? So a lot of companies are changing. I would say a lot of the Western companies are changing the way in which work is managed. So a lot of the core and permanent employees are based in the West, but a lot of the platform work is outsourced, in fact, to new emerging countries. And, you know, whilst we may have legislation to protect employees in the West, the employees or agency workers in this case, you know, who are outsourced to do the factual platform work, you know, from places outside of, you know, in new and emerging countries, let me call it that, they're not necessarily protected. So, you know, do you just focus on this issue from a kind of Western perspective or Eurocentric perspective, or do you look at this as a broader issue?
Mm-hmm.
Broader ethical issue around, you know, how work is organized, and the rights of ultimately the rights of workers, regardless of where they are in the world.
Yeah. So yeah, this is an excellent point. Thank you for bringing this up. And we're going to touch a little bit on outsourcing later on in this session. So I mean, if you look at this, for example, it's about you protecting European workers. You're completely right. This is like a very Eurocentric perspective, where it's about like protecting people who are in the EU. Although I might add, like in the platform sector, there is a lot of like migrants, people who've recently arrived in countries that work there, and I absolutely agree with you. It is a global issue. I think there's been a lot of press, for example, around the data labeling that made the AI, the data sets that were used to train the big AI models like ChatGPT and so on, to clean them up and so on. These were also outsourced, and we unfortunately haven't done any work on this at the moment. So I think it is fair to say that we're still quite Eurocentric, but kind of trying to leave that mold. And kind of have more of a like global perspective, because I think what we do need is kind of a global due diligence governance in some way, and a way to kind of keep companies along the global value chain accountable. So attempts have been made like in textile industry and so on. I think we need kind of this kind of approach for technology as well. So thank you very much for pointing that out. Yeah, okay. Then again, I'm gonna, it's Saturday. We're going to watch a short video.
Do you work from home and your laptop has tracking software on it and you want to make your boss think you're still working even though you just went to get a snack or go to the bathroom or something? God, this is a mouse jiggler. Basically, it moves the cursor on your computer so that the tracking software installed by your boss thinks that you're still working, thinks that you're still doing stuff. What? Where's the jiggle? I thought there was going to be more jiggle. That's all it's doing. Why does it have to be this big? So here's one that works with your existing mouse. You just press the button and, okay. So how does that work? Oh, that's still just on the vertical line? Like that's all it does? Our workers are just moving horizontally a lot. If your boss sucks, consider getting jiggly with it.
Yeah, so this is just, I don't know, I am very fascinated by the cottage industry of influencers that kind of react to AI tools at the workplace. And for some reason, this is like being flooded into my like For You page a lot. So I just think it's funny how kind of people try to protect themselves, and how, again, there is like people who have found a way to make money from like people trying to protect themselves from this kind of tracking. And that's why I just wanted to show this as a quick breather in between. So if there's tracking software installed, apparently you can jiggle your mouse and kind of try to fool your
Do you work from home and your laptop has tracking?
Oops. Okay. So just to give you an overview of what we're doing, I'm going to give some input on first on call centers and then on process mining, and I'm going to explain what that is. This is going to be based on the work of Wolfi Christel, who is an Austrian researcher with Cracked Labs, and a project that he did where Algorithm Watch also played a small part on surveillance in the workplace. And he did several kind of case studies where he looked at, for example, a process mining company in depth, and also he did kind of a big literary review of like call center research. And that's what I'm going to be basing this presentation on. After this short presentation, we're going to put you in breakout groups and discuss a kind of scenario related to this kind of tracking surveillance software. Okay, so as I already said, this is based on Wolfi Christel's work, which I highly recommend. And he examined kind of call center technology or like software developers, especially the first one, Genesis, which is mentioned here, and a couple of other ones as well. It's a software that's used to monitor 720,000 workers, so it's kind of like very important in the industry. So we're kind of going to look at different things that this technology allows you to do in a call center. The first is around performance metrics, targeting, and ranking. So you can identify outliers and kind of automatically appoint coaching sessions to employees if you see they're not performing as well maybe as others. You can get real-time feedback on performance ratings, and monetary incentives can be used to incentivize work, all on a quite like individualized basis. You can have electronic wallboards that show you metrics to group workers. So you can create peer pressure. So you just have like a big wallpaper in the background where everybody sees how good everybody else is. I think this used to be done a lot as well, like before technology, that you would have, like, especially in the sales context, people would kind of say, okay, I've got like 5 sales today, and there's always like a competition going on. And workers can be obligated to collect points throughout the day by behaving as desired to compete with other teams. So this is performance metrics and ranking. Then a big feature of the call center is kind of the queue. It's the virtual assembly line. I see we have a question. This assessment is based on recording phone calls of individuals calling. Yeah, it's based on all of the tasks that they have, and phone calls are, of course, an important part of the tasks there, but it would also be kind of post-call work. It can all be kind of tracked based on the task that they're doing. So the queue, this is kind of the virtual assembly line. It's the queues, the calls that are queued up for each worker. And there, this Genesis software provides mechanisms to automatically prioritize and assign interactions, so calls, emails, chats, and other tasks to workers. So you kind of have an automatic list of like tasks, and you always have like automatically assign the next thing that you're going to do. Scripts and other automated workflow tools tell the workers what to do when and how, so how to respond to questions, and there can be like negative repercussions if you don't adhere to the script. And this can increase work intensity, of course, and it leaves like the people working in the call center with little autonomy. And then we have kind of monitoring. So the Genesis and other software allows call centers to fully monitor and record calls, other communications, contents, and screen activities. I think we've all like encountered this if we talk to like a call center, I don't know, for like a product that we need or something. Usually you have like the automatic voice in the beginning saying, are you okay that all our calls are being recorded for training purposes? I think we've probably all heard that. So this is kind of what this is referring to. And this can include an automated analysis of word clusters and sentiments. So what we've been seeing on the video and audio analysis is also being used here to automate what kind of words people are using and analyze their sentiments. And managers have access to monitoring data at all times and can, for example, listen in on calls. The software provider says that workers are aware of this, but it is kind of unclear how this is implemented in each company. So if all like managers actually, like if this is always the case, is a bit unclear. And a combination of training with skills assessment and monitoring. So as I said, like you always hear this message, all of our calls are recorded for training purposes, but the training and the skills assessment, they're kind of mixed up. So it's not only about like helping you to become better, it's also like about your performance assessment, which can also lead to negative repercussions. And then there is workplace planning and automated shift scheduling. So the software can automatically schedule shifts, breaks, and assignments to particular work activities. This means, for example, that if you have 3 breaks in a day, it can be that the software kind of decides when these breaks are. So it's not necessarily when you need a break. It's kind of when you're allowed to take one by the software. The aim is kind of always to have like to match supply and demand. So when are people most calling, that's when we need most workers available. And you want to minimize the idle time of workers and be able to send workers who are like currently have idle time, you want to send them home or kind of minimize that. So it's based on a forecasting mechanism where they basically calculate when do we expect the highest demand or the highest like number of calls coming in. And it can reward, like this is a possibility, this is of course not always implemented, but it can reward higher rated workers and prioritize them to choose their shifts. And this kind of workplace planning and automated shift scheduling is also something that we see in the gig economy. We recently did a survey with Lieferando workers, which we haven't published the results yet. We're currently analyzing them. And something that we see there is Lieferando, for example, which is a German ride-hail service. So you can order food and they deliver it to you, like Uber Eats or something like that. So what they do is kind of they promise workers flexibility. That's one of their main points towards that they put out towards prospective employees, and say, hey, you can come here, you can work with us, you can combine this with your life, with your schedule, with your studies, with your other job. But in reality, of course, when do most people order food? In the evenings and in the weekends. So in the end, they cannot promise this kind of flexibility. And it's kind of like Lieferando does it on a first take, first serve basis. So everybody has to log in at a certain time and kind of grab the shifts that they want. And many people are then kind of left with shifts that don't actually fit their life. And this is not something that is necessarily made transparent by companies. So I don't know exactly in the call center space, but you can definitely see that this means that you don't have kind of the flexibility that you need sometimes. And this is important in this context because call center workers are, like a lot of them are part-time workers. This is usually something that you kind of do to earn a bit of money extra, or many people use it that way. Yes. Yeah, now I'm coming to that actually. So who actually works in call centers? It's very hard to estimate the scale of employment in Europe, actually. But it is clear that it's being outsourced and offshored since the 2000s. So on the scale of employment in Europe, I think there's different varying numbers. I heard, for example, 1% of workforce in Europe, which seems to be a lot, but again, it's kind of very hard to say how big the workforce actually is. 69% of people who work in call centers are female, and 29% work as part-time or temporary workers. And many of the outsourcing companies that operate call centers have in recent years also switched to content moderation and data labeling. So actually they have been cases where people, for example, in Kenya, expected to work for a call center, but ended up making ChatGPT less toxic. So kind of looking at very disturbing material and labeling it so that in the end, here in the West, we have a nice, clean ChatGPT that doesn't have sexual imagery or doesn't have, or sexual language, doesn't have bad words and so on. The reason is clear because it's kind of a similar skill set that is needed. Usually it's kind of English language proficiency that is needed there, and a relatively high skill of level of education actually to kind of be able to respond. But then they also the companies want to spend as little money as possible, and there is a series of kind of like subsidiary companies. So kind of the responsibility is deflected, like OpenAI has a subsidiary, they have a subsidiary, and then in the end, nobody knows who are the people actually working for and what are the conditions, and nobody takes responsibility for that. And the effects on workers can be high stress, anxiety, burnout. What I said before, like if you only have all day, your whole day is filled with high efficiency tasks, that can be very tiring. They have low control, of course, because everything is scripted. You have to meet a certain pace. It's a kind of negative work environment, unfair rewards and so on, punishment for lower ratings and stress. There is emotional dissonance. So if you kind of have to be nice all day, that can take a load on you. And you have to kind of stick to a script that maybe is not like your own language. This is kind of an emotional stress that is kind of very hard to quantify and address and talk about. And there is a job insecurity. Like this is a sector where there's a lot of movement, a lot of outsourcing, and you never know if your job is secure, and it can just have like physical problems like headaches, sore eyes, shoulders and neck. So what we see a lot in office work anyway. And I'm just going to read from the report from Wolfgang Christelgid, one account of a worker working in a call center. And I'm just going to read it out. So he was working exclusively from home. The scheduling algorithm assigned him ever-changing shifts, start times from Monday to Sunday. While it allowed him to indicate preferences for days off, it systematically ignored these preferences. He had only 3 short breaks for toilet visits or lunch per 8-hour shift, which were also automatically pre-scheduled. After finishing a call, the system automatically connected the next call. He was constantly required to meet the targets for 5 real-time performance metrics, including average call duration, after-call work time, first contact resolution rate, break schedule adherence, and customer rating. When he missed a target, the corresponding rating would turn red and the supervisor would call him, which he experienced as a virtual whip. All conversations as well as his computer screen were recorded. Occasionally, he would receive a report assessing a past call. So this is I think this is an extreme case as well, but it kind of paints a picture of how the condition may be. This was a worker working in Poland. And yeah, kind of this is the overview of the call center work. And like the reason why I wanted to point this out is, as I said, this is a very well researched field. We kind of know how this works. But there is a new technology out there that kind of allows different companies to move in this direction that call centers and logistics companies have already been in for a while, and that is process mining. So what is process mining? This is software that it's sold to companies who want to analyze their processes and find inefficiencies. So it breaks down the work process into like small individual tasks and then makes suggestions of how you can make your process more efficient. So instead of like going around and like having like an inefficient way and a lot of people involved who maybe don't have to be involved in the process, in the end you have like a very streamlined process and it's all quite efficient, which like of course sounds like a good thing, especially for a company because it could maximize profit, you kind of lose idle time and so on. But it does have some like direct effects on people working there, which I think could turn different kinds of jobs into more this what we see with call centers, which is that granular activity logging can turn even like a complex job into a simple checklist. And this means that you could, in theory at least, like employ a lot more lower scale workers who only like fixate on one task, and you don't have to have like more trained employees or people who work there longer who have like a more holistic view, make more of their own decisions, and like understand more about like the whole task that's going on. So you can kind of isolate workers, isolate tasks, and have like the possibility of getting much more lower scale workers, and be like, you would suffer less if you have to like fire people, you can have higher turnover and so on. So it is true, I think somebody just wrote that in the chat, that this is kind of a dystopian view, but it is happening. So I'm basing this on the analysis of Christi Wolfe of the program Celonis. It's a German company who sells its software throughout the world, and is apparently used by quite a lot of like large companies. And kind of the thesis that he puts out, and I'm happy to discuss it with you, what do you think about it, if this is maybe just too doomerist, or if he is right, we can talk about that. That is that more platforms in the tradition, like more workplaces that like operate more traditionally right now, could become like platform work and like call centers. Okay, that's kind of my input for the moment. And maybe because I do realize that this is quite like a pointed thesis that I'm putting out there. So if somebody like strongly disagrees, or also if you just want to share your thoughts, please go ahead. Does this seem too dystopian? Yes, I think Chris, please go ahead.
I might as well comment from personal experience.
Yes,
I think it's about 20 years now ago, and I think I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was looking for a part-time job, and I found one at a call center. And on one hand, I already recognize a lot of the things you mentioned, like there were also performance indicators, and like, but even then, I mean, 20 years ago, I think these kind of practices were already being implemented. Even not even that recent. I feel I remember we had all these trackers about how many phone calls you did and things like that. And I quit the job in 2 months because it was horrible. But so I really understand the things you're saying at the same time. But also a kind of comment, like, I'm not sure these things are 100% new all the time. So also wondering how versus newer technologies play into this. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that's the reason why I chose this example, because it's very well researched and we know like that it works that way. And the point that I'm trying to make is that we have now technology in place that allows more companies to move in this direction. Yeah. Okay, Yannick.
Yeah. This example makes quite an interesting point, because if we look at workers' co-determination, which is quite strong in Germany or in Austria, I think in Austria as well, we have a very keen sense of what is allowed and what is not. For example, performance measurement and surveillance. It's all basically has to be agreed upon by the Workers' Council. But this also makes up a huge problem, obviously. If a company doesn't have a Workers' Council, so there's no co-determination. And the other thing is, it's a quite national law. It applies to Germany or Austria. And corporations usually don't stick to national borders, as you made it clear. The call centers are outsourced, and this is true especially as well for application ranking or the whole recruiting management at some point. These things are outsourced where different rules apply, and so our need GDPR or German DSGVO doesn't apply there. So in the end, we need some legislation that is transnational, basically, and not bound to national rules.
Yeah, thank you, Yannick. This is actually kind of the perfect segue to the next thing that I wanted to discuss with you. And that is, we're going to imagine that we are in a co-determination situation, basically. So in a minute, we're going to divide you up in some breakout groups. And I would like to ask you to kind of discuss this scenario. So you work as a sales representative for an office supply company. The management has decided to introduce a new software to track, monitor, and optimize workflows. They promise that routine tasks will be more efficient, allowing employees to focus more on relationship building with customers and on creative tasks. But from another company that already uses the software, you have heard from the workers there that it also, like, there are some negative impacts as well. For example, it assesses performance and even makes decisions about promotion and termination. In this scenario, you have a union, very cool, and you have maybe even a works council, and they have set up a meeting with the management to start a co-determination process. And your job is kind of to come up with questions that you want the union to ask the management to make sure that your rights are protected as an employee in this situation. So this is the scenario. You can find the notes on Moodle as well. You can either take a picture here or find the notes on Moodle. This is, let me see, slide 25 in the slides deck in case study 4. And again, please maybe think about somebody you would like to present afterwards, because afterwards we're kind of going to meet in the group. And I think 10 minutes might be good time to discuss this. I'm going to be moving through the, if it works out, I'll be moving through the rooms again. Okay. So I would like to ask one person from each group to briefly present their results, and please keep timing in mind. So just maybe in a couple of sentences, just highlight the most important things that you discussed. That would be great. And let's just start with group 1. I don't know.
Okay.
If
so yes, I'm Asma. I'm going to present our points for group number 1. So we had a nice conversation, and we had many insights and many point of views that were very interesting, and particularly regarding the data protection, the GDPR. So what kind of data is being collected, by who, and what is being disclosed to the employee. Also because the company is also in need to be transparent, and they have to explicitly inform the employees if there are any recourses, if there are any guidelines, and what are the consequences of certain actions. In particular, for the consequences, the reason why we discussed about this is for the performance evaluation, because there must be some guidelines that the employee can refer to regarding their performance, since it's also linked to promotion and termination. And then does the company apply measures for fairness and anti-discrimination, and does, with this kind of software, respect the health norms? So for example, the employees have to have a time limit. They cannot stay in front of the screen for more than 2 hours, for example, without any break. So are those breaks also inside these for the new software, or are they going to be counted as penalties? And then the union should also have the info on a regular basis, and they should also look into the system with an expert on a procedural basis. So they have to collect information and see if the company is being transparent enough. But most importantly, this software also have a consequence, a social consequence, about how it affects the workplace and the condition of work, and in particular the employees and their team building and relationship between both each other and both the employee and the company. And in particular, because of that, it's also important to have special counseling and places where the employee can talk to an expert and help on managing stress and the workload, since these automation workflows usually tend to reduce the idle time. So there is also proportionally the stress of the employee gets higher. And that is all.
Great, thank you very much. That was a great list of measures. Very good. Okay, I'll turn it over to group 2.
I think I was in group 2. I'll speak anyway. Nobody else is speaking on it. So we discussed a number of issues. Transparency was a really big thing for us. It's got to be absolutely clear what the purposes are, and it can't go beyond that purpose. You can't collect information for one purpose and then have a mission creep and use it for something else. We discussed a scenario where it would be legitimate for a security cameras to be at the door of a nightclub and watching the security staff for their own safety. But then if you were to use that to punish them for taking too long in their breaks, it would be beyond the reason for collecting the data in the first place. Proper impact assessments would have to be done before taking anything on board like this. If you don't explain it properly, then there will be a perception of discrimination, even if there isn't discrimination in it. There must be an equality impact assessment as well. Is everyone being treated fairly? The legal basis for collecting the information, there's very little way we can see consent being viable in this. So you'd have to, again, goes back to transparency, the legitimate interest assessment would have to fully explain that. Only keeping information relative to the purpose, so you'd have to have proper monitoring of the data being collected and making that information available to individuals as well. There we go.
Yeah, great. Really great points. Okay, let's hear from group 3, please.
Hi, so I think I will speak for the group 3. We discussed quite a lot of points. So, first of all, like important question.
I think you were frozen for a moment. We can't hear you. Okay, I would suggest we come back to Frida in a moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I switched the connection. So so first of all, important thing, like we gather this information. It is really crucial to define specifically what information will be gathered in order to make those decisions about promotion, decision like what is exactly tracked, what is monitored, like specifically define the information, and give like the employees an option to opt out if this information is like sensible or really not legally required to make the evaluation of your performance, like really an option to opt out of certain sensitive or very personal information, or opt out of irrelevant, like previously we're talking about background being evaluated as something about your performance. So this is the first point. Then other points that we were talking about, for example, if there is a decision is transparency and explainability of that decision is really crucial. Will we be employees be able to actually get into the reasons and whys of why and how the decision was taken? And that comes to another question. Will there be like a human in between this automated system and the employee? Will there be like a mechanism to kind of appeal or somehow explain possibility to explain for the employee like what actually happened, or somehow like to give backup information to that decision, or this decision will just automatically strictly from the machine will go into like the system without any human in the between. So the necessity of human in between decision employee. Then other important issue is like the scope of data usage, and will it really be fully disclosed, like very transparent and very specific manner, like the purpose and scope of the data usage. Another question is, okay, we have all these issues, and who is going, we put the system in place, who is going to monitor or audit the compliance? How the compliance with human rights in general, for Europe it will be AI Act, GDPR, or whatever, and as there are issues in other jurisdictions, or there are no human rights in general, even without specific laws, they are universal. How this is going to be monitored within the company. Will they be making the audits? Will they have a person that is responsible for the compliance specifically, or they will just like use the system for their benefit, for company's benefit, without taking care of human rights? Like, is there a mechanism in place? Is there a plan for that? So yeah, these are like the question that we discussed, and yeah.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much from group 3. Okay, moving on to the final group 4. And remember, this is all recorded, so we can check this later if needed. Over to group 4, who is going to speak?
Yeah, that's me. Lots of the things that we discussed have, of course, also been mentioned. So first of all, which kind of data it collects, which criteria it's used to assess this data. Also very much important, who can see the data? Can only the worker see the data, or can only the boss see the data, or HR? I think that already is a very important point. Also considering the argument that is used is so you can do your job better. So that also warrants the question, well, why should your manager then see it? How the data is displayed, and for which decisions, of course, the data is used. So indeed, decisions regarding your performance, whether you get promoted, whether you get laid off, these kind of decisions, are they included as well or not? And also whether there are other ways than software to tackle the same issue. So perhaps there's other ways to get there without trying technological solutions. And lastly, we've thought about worker enjoyment as well. So the question also is about, well, the argument is used that you can be more focused on more creative tasks. Well, at the same time, you can also wonder whether whether it will also take the pleasure out of the work for some people if they get managed like this. And well, it's a tight labor market in some countries, so maybe you don't want to, like, as an employer, don't want to take the joy out of your work for your employees, and you actually want to make sure they like it as much as possible. There's also the point of, and lastly, related to this, also when things get automated, that might also just make a job more repetitive, which can actually also lead to mistakes. So this is another point we discussed. Yeah, I think I got all of it. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you very much. This was a great insight and a lot of different points, kind of from the health aspects, social aspects, as well as data use and so on. So Algorithm Watch a couple of years ago came up with a guidebook for works councils in Germany, kind of as a guide for the questions they can ask companies when people analytics software is being introduced. And I mean, it covered basically a lot of the things you were just discussing. Just gonna pop it in the chat if you're interested. And I just like to, I think you've covered all of the relevant points. There's just one point that I would like to add from this experience that we had with the Works Council. So feedback that we got a lot is actually our discussions with management were quite constructive, and like they want to like implement this right, but they cannot answer the questions that we ask them. For example, like how are the decisions made and so on, because they just bought a software, and the software developer does not want to disclose this information because they think it's they treat it as a trade secret. So in many cases, actually, the guidelines we are developed, I would say, are quite useful for employers when they're buying software as well, because they cannot like respond to their employees' questions and address the things that employees are concerned about. As a final thought. Okay, so that is kind of the main points of these case study sessions. Thank you very much for participating so much. I hope it was interesting for you. I have one last thing before you leave, and it actually ties to something that Ivor mentioned a little bit. So for FINDHR, we have already put up several publications. Actually, it's 3 publications that we have here, and we would like you very much to feedback on them. So they have been published on a kind of collaborative platform called Decidem in, I have to admit, a not very like user-friendly format. I'm sorry about that. But we would like to ask you if you have a moment of time to kind of look at them and feedback on them. So it's 3 different kind of deliverables. The first is an impact assessment or publications. The first is an impact assessment. The second is process equality monitoring tool, and the third is a software development guide. So if you could like go on the link that I've shared here with the QR code and take a look at it, we would be very, very happy. I think it could be interesting, like the impact assessment is maybe for the kind of ethics people in the room is interesting. The equality monitoring protocol is maybe interesting for everybody working in law, and the software development guide for, I would say, like tech people. So please have a look. And before I close, if you have any final remarks, now is the time. Otherwise, we will be closing in a couple of minutes. Daniela, is there anything that we need to mention additionally?
Not for this classroom. Next week there will be the data analysis part, and I will write you an email because you have to be on time. I will be one of the teachers of the in-presence course, but there will be other teachers for the online course, both for programmers and non-programmers. But the most important thing is to be on time, even before on time. Yeah, 5 minutes earlier because we have to start and we can't wait for the others, at least non-programmers. Programmers can manage it, but non-programmers, it's very, very useful that you look at the video we did last week, the installation day, because I have to give you some additional nodes to install. Okay, I'm finalizing that, and so I will guide you to the installation of these nodes, and it's very important to be on time. And final but not least, I don't know. So enjoy your weekend and see you next week.
Yes.
Okay.
And thank you very, very much. I found these discussions very interesting. I think like I've also learned a lot from you. Please stay in touch. I just shared my email address in the chat. You can also, I'm also happy to connect on LinkedIn. Just gonna type my full name so that you can find me on LinkedIn. And yeah, thank you very much.